We have an esteemed panel here, 6 of us, so hopefully we'll have make it very informative for you all as far as connected TV advertising, what's happening in the market, and how to take advantage of it. I'm Michelle Abraham. I'm a market research analyst with S&P Global Market Intelligence, the media research division known as Kagan, and I've been looking at connected TV advertising technology for a couple of years now, and it's definitely a market that's getting a lot of attention in the advertising market right now as it's growing pretty dramatically. Our figures have going from, and this is just the US, so there's certainly activity going on outside the US as well, from about $2.1 billion in 2018 to $2.7 billion in 2019. So that is on the various platforms that are available. For those of you who aren't familiar, connected TV advertising is in-stream advertising, so that it's part of the video stream. It's not a separate pop-up window or anything that appears on a page. And it's delivered to the connected TV sets, so either through the TV set directly itself, or it is delivered in the content that is delivered through a streaming media device to the TV set, whether that be a video game console, a Roku, a Fire TV, or any of the number of other devices that you can do that. So with that said, in that definition provided, I wanted to go ahead and let our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Alan Klosowski. I run our Advanced Solutions group at SpotX. SpotX is a platform for video advertisers, which is specifically used by the supply-side broadcasters and others to manage programmatic and dynamic advertising in their connected TV inventory.
I'm Sean Doherty Jr. I'm one of the co-founders of Wurl. We are kind of a global TV platform operating a backbone basically for streaming and monetization of television, connecting 3 constituencies really, what we call video producers, so content owners of all kinds, connected TV-based streaming services, and finally advertisers.
I'm Reed Barker. I'm head of advertising at Philo. Philo is a virtual MVPD focused on entertainment, knowledge, and lifestyle. It's 58 channels for $20, which includes all the functions and features. Channels from Viacom, Discovery, Scripps, all the major linear channels you should see. We're supported by subscription as well as by advertising, and on the advertising side, we've really leaned into programmatic, especially in the CTV space, where about 95% of our viewing is done. So that's that.
I'm Gerrit Niemeijer. I work with Ampersand. Ampersand is a company that basically uses audience data, puts it in a platform, and sells TV inventory, local cable TV inventory in the United States. We're not a well-known name, but we're a decent-sized company. We did about we're doing 1.6 billion in revenue this year, top-line revenue. Traditionally, 10 years ago, we would sell what we now would call legacy TV inventory. Today, we're selling still that, but we're selling also connected TV, over-the-top inventory. And we look at it holistically, so we would look at it as an audience, a TV audience, independent of what screen they're using to consume the content.
Hi, I'm Rachel Gantz from Comscore. I run Comscore's activation business, which is the business unit where we provision data for the purposes of ad targeting in a digital, mobile, and now a CTV environment. We work with both media buyers and media sellers. Media buyers helping make sure they have the right data to reach their intended audiences across platforms, and including a new offer on CTV. And from a media seller standpoint, it's all about helping to monetize advertising inventory. So meeting demo guarantees and creating and providing advertisers with brand safe and contextually relevant environments across screens.
Yeah, I'm Jay from VideoAmp. We're a software and data company that helps unify and enable traditional linear television from the upfronts in a traditional planning method to completely now creating data-driven cross-screen capabilities from the upfronts, and then enabling buyers and sellers to transact both programmatically as well as through traditional TV buying methods, all through software.
So since several of our panelists actually, and this is kind of off script, have brought up programmatic, how many of you in the room know what programmatic advertising is? And okay, so most of you. All right, we don't need to provide a definition then. All right, just asking.
The question is, do they all think it means the same thing?
Well, yes, there probably are, but we'll probably get into a lot of different things in the panel itself as to what programmatic means. So what do you all see as the benefits of connected TV advertising? You know, how should an advertiser or someone with ad inventory think about connected TV versus digital video versus traditional TV opportunities?
I think it's all about the audience. So TV is a very powerful medium for advertisers. It's got great content, people are engaged with it, it has an enormous reach. And to me, but people are moving away from watching it, you know, the content on and engaging with it on a TV in the living room to a cable company. But there's more and more fragmentation, and they consume it now more and more over through connected TVs. So I think the advantage for advertisers is it's the same audience they constantly want to reach anyway. They're just now in different places. So that's why they need to engage with that.
To a degree, it's also a basic stratification, right? Older demographics watch linear TV, younger demographics are more on-demand oriented and streaming, both on the television and their mobile device. So depending on your goals as an advertiser, what kind of creative you're trying to run, you might definitely have some optionality there to consider.
Yeah, and I think that you can, in its best view, CTV sort of has the power to be the best of both worlds, from TV and digital, where you can have the branding power and the audience capture that TV holds, but you can have the addressability and the more granular targeting and a lot of the components that people are more used to from a digital standpoint, if it can sort of live up to what we all think it should.
Yeah, and for CTV, when you're, as opposed to digital video, when someone's watching on a television, they're watching, linear channels, say HGTV or something, they're going to watch through the ad. So you're addressing the ad to that household, but the viewability is on a television. It's the biggest screen in the house, and people are able to, they'll watch through the commercial pod. It's unskippable because they want to get to the program and see what the house looks like after they fix it up.
It's also an opportunity to capture either a different audience segment, as we talked about, that's kind of a younger audience segment, or to extend existing linear campaigns and capture, kind of hit those same linear viewers, because oftentimes, the linear viewer is not only a linear viewer, they're also a streaming viewer, they're also an SVOD user, and for us, capturing both the linear viewer and, hitting them both on the streaming side and the linear side is an opportunity that CTV brings.
And I think from our side, what we hear a lot from the actual advertisers themselves is the idea that they can get to kind of incremental and new audience using the data targeting that they wouldn't be able to do using highly indexed traditional television plans. So what we hear a lot is that people ended up in linear television buying the same programming over and over again, in part because it indexed too low against their demographic, that if they bought a spot, much of their spot was wasted. Whereas somebody who's trying to find maybe 5 to 10% of the audience for Monday Night Football can buy that programmatically, but they can't afford to buy that spot with such a large audience in a traditional linear environment because the cost to return is too low. And from the suppliers who have this inventory, being able to carve up the most valuable audiences to each individual advertiser and sell 5 to 10% to this one, and 5 to 10% to that one, and 2% to that one, and 20% to this one, they can end up charging much higher rates where the advertisers get a higher return on ad spend and reach an incremental audience by not buying the same programming over and over again. So both sides benefit. I mean, the supply partners or the people that have the inventory can get much higher rates for what they're trying to get. And their yield is better, while at the same time, we're looking at advertisers getting a higher return on ad spend because they're hitting their core demographic and many times an incremental audience that they were otherwise unable to reach.
Okay. So Jay, how does an advertiser take advantage of this source of addressable inventory? Where do they find it?
Yes, well, it depends on, I guess, how you're trying to take it to market. So the transition originally, right, there was this sort of jump ball for what CTV was going to be. Will it be owned by the digital side of the house, which was fast embracing programmatic, or will it be the traditional television buying and planning divisions within an agency holding company that would own that? I think it's, the battle was won more so by the traditionalists, but most of the smart holding companies are reorienting their entire structure around unified planning and process so that you're not siloing TV and digital, because, for example, you can buy the same TV show on live or on demand through a cable operator or through streaming on demand or through a digital app. So buying that TV show now is much more complicated than it used to be, and each one of those devices or formats may be reaching a different audience. So I think now to look at it as a single source of addressable inventory means that you have to actually have very specific goals for, let's say, if you're working with Nissan has 6 cars that are in market at any point in time, and they may have 2 or 3 personas that are good fits for that car. They're going to use different data sets in a combination of addressable and non-addressable inventory to meet those reach goals to sell, let's say, the Nissan electric car, the Leaf. So it's actually more complicated than it used to be, but at the same time, there's tools and data that make it possible to take advantage of that, because that's now the new reality, is that you can't just say that, oh, I think I want to buy Big Bang Theory, therefore I'm going to reach all the same demo that I used to get from a Nielsen report. That's no longer ever going to be the case.
And one of the things that we've seen about that in terms of getting to that is if you're going to apply that much targeting, it's also about getting to scale, right? So where we've seen kind of a rise on the buy side and investment in programmatic technologies is the idea that they can go in and they can work with platforms and MVPDs, virtual MVPDs, programmers and broadcasters, and they can pull all of that inventory into a buy-side platform, and then they can do data, kind of data enablement against all of the different types of inventory that would be out there in order to create scale. Because to do all of this advanced targeting and planning that Nissan may need, in order to make it effective, they also need to get massive reach. So, for example, on our platform, I think the last number I saw was we have 40 million plus ad-supported connected TV households. Now, that's bigger than most MVPDs that are out there, but that's part of kind of all of the partners in the ecosystem working together to intelligently make their inventory available to these large agencies, brands, and buyers in a way that all of them can take advantage of this, because if each individual pocket of inventory goes out with their own kind of specialized targeting and programs and everything else, then what you end up getting to is too much fragmentation in the scale, and then you can't actually execute a campaign, which makes it less attractive as a medium as opposed to more attractive.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we've leaned into programmatic, because we're a virtual MVPD, but in fact, when an advertiser is thinking about reach across households, we're thinking 100 million households in the US. There's 6 to 8 million virtual MVPDs. So by working with programmatic vendors, we're able to somebody wants to buy CTV inventory, brand safe on a virtual MVPD. We just want to be included in those buys and be very frictionless for people to get access to our inventory. Targeted, addressable, but still part of a larger pool. So they're looking for those audiences. They need all the eyeballs they can get across a virtual MVPD space. So we're just trying to be there and working with all these partners to make sure that happens.
From the technology side too, you've got to make the inventory look like other inventory. If it stands out, it's kind of a problem, counterintuitively. And so, we do all kinds of stuff inside Wurl across all of this inventory, across all of the publishers we work with and all the different distribution options, making that inventory, normalizing it, having the right metadata around it that goes into all these programmatic stacks and that kind of stuff is extremely important to really, making the buy side say, oh yeah, I recognize what this is.
Okay. So we've definitely mentioned the fragmentation as in with so many different sources of supply. Gerrit, are there any other issues that you see in the fragmentation that need to be solved or resolved before we really get to, for that connected TV advertising numbers to grow for everyone?
Yeah, I think measurement is a massive issue. I mean, it was going to always be that way, but now with privacy regulation, if more European standards around IP address being considered PII, that's obviously going to impact right now, which is ad serving logs, which is how you would get at least that an impression ran, right? That this IP address registered an impression. And furthermore, as you get more delivery that is going to be aggregated so that everyone in an apartment building might have the same IP address, then that's going to be a problem for delivery. So the issue is that as the streaming platforms versus the streaming providers versus the virtual MVPDs are all building data and building capabilities, you have in essence the fragmentation of I don't want to share my data issues. And that's going to make it hard for advertisers to be able to buy holistically. And that would hold back the addressability part of OTT, which the traditional television and cable providers on the linear side, they're moving fast ahead to keep pushing that because I think they're hedging their bets, right? They know that OTT is going to be a problem when it comes to that from a measurement and addressability standpoint. So they're going to keep pushing on the traditional channels, like what Gerrit's doing, because that's going to be where there's actually still more growth. So OTT has growing pains around ID structure and what's going to be privacy versus non-privacy compliant, and will all of the emerging walled gardens of OTT and CTV cooperate with each other to make it easier for advertisers? Currently, right now, the answer is no.
But I think I want to come back to also what you guys were talking about, because my company comes from the more traditional TV side of the house. I don't think CTV is a problem. I think it's a solution to a fragmentation problem. Because I think that television is a medium that is all about scale and reach, to what you guys were talking about. It's powerful content, it's got engagement, but it needs scale. And today I see problems with fragmentation. I see it both for the consumer, because now I need like 16 different streaming apps, and I don't like that as a consumer. I know that that's not the topic for this panel, but certainly for advertisers that's a big problem, because they don't want to have to buy 17 different places. In fact, we've seen this before in TV, where at some point we have got satellite, we got telcos, we got all these cable companies, all fiercely competing. And the advertisers just walked away because they had to deal with every one of them. It's an issue. And so what we have done, not just us, but what the industry has done, is brought it all together into a single platform. And we convinced people like DirecTV, Fios, Comcast, etc., to pull their inventory together and let us put it in one platform, because it would make more money for each and every one of them. And I think the same thing is going to happen with connected TV. Not just between connected TV player A and player B, but between connected TV and OTT and traditional television. It's a powerful medium only if you can keep the audiences whole. If you're going to fragment it, we're competing with Google. There's not a different Google for sports keywords for search versus other keywords. So we need to be one walled garden also for TV.
Right, and I think that's what currently isn't there for, if you're just buying OTT and you have a campaign in which you're buying either through programmatic channels or direct into Roku, but then you're also buying a whole bunch of individual TV programmers, you're buying across NBCU and A&E, et cetera, you will not have a unified measurement of that campaign. And then ultimately now you're talking to having to put together 5 different reports and then hopefully seeing what did I actually reach. That's the current problem of CTV.
And that needs to be addressed. We need to address that, because we're gonna all suffer from that. It's not a linear versus CTV player A or player B. We're gonna all suffer from that.
Yeah, it will hold the industry back, because then, one, you won't be embracing advanced audiences, which is required if you're gonna compete with Facebook, Google, Amazon, because all they sell is advanced audiences, and they can give you exact measurement on their platforms, right? So.
And I think to your point, though, on advanced audiences, it gets into common ground about not just the inventory and the platforms to eliminate some of the fragmentation, but also the data, right? So if we can, from an advanced audience standpoint, as it relates both to targeting and on the measurement, which, you know,
Agree
coming
to
from Comscore,
what is the definition of an auto intender, et cetera.
yeah, and or just consistently have the application of going after an audience, where it regardless of which platform, or you know, whether you go in a programmatic in an open exchange or programmatic through a PMP or a direct buy, making sure that we are consistently going after those advanced audiences that we're actually intending to.
Right. I guess the last thing that the premium content industry needs to do is to try to recreate age and gender as the proxy to monetize all this, because then that will also be a losing proposition.
Well, and the reality of the situation is that what we're seeing most, I mean, we get a lot of, you know, our customers are the broadcasters and the platforms and, you know, the actual new digital entrants. And one of the questions we get a lot is, well, what data should we be creating to bring to the equation that buyers are going to buy from? And when we actually talk, because our customers are also the agencies and media brands, when we actually talk to them, what they're really saying is, hey, I'll use your Nissan example. I have my own CRM data. I want to bring my CRM data to the equation. I don't need a common definition of an auto intender. I have a Nissan Leaf segment of people that I've modeled across mobile and I've modeled it across desktop, and now I want to bring that into TV, and I have these other targets that I want to be able to do, and I'm bringing this in, and I want to be able to hit this segment. So can you take the data that I already have in massive pools of data for things like CPG brands and auto brands? Can I bring that in and can I use it? And then can I do audience discovery across all of the possible places I could spend my money? Can I do that across MVPDs and the platforms and the broadcasters and the O&O apps and the TVE apps and then maybe the cable apps? And can I find them all? Can I do unified reach and frequency planning against all of that? Can I figure out where they are? Can I not advertise to the people that I know that, you know, just bought a car last month because that's wasted impression? And can I execute against that? And I think that's part of what we have to kind of solve together. And I think the more that we move to, like you mentioned, in terms of kind of making the inventory look and behave and feel like everything else, once it moves away from proprietary locked-in systems to kind of VAST-based transactions with universal kind of data and things like, you know, device identifiers coming from the TV and all of the things that we would need that we can transact in a privacy-safe environment, then we can start to take that data, we can start to bring it into the transaction, and then you can plan it, you can forecast it, you can negotiate with it, you can execute against it, and then you've got to, you know, again, tie that into your TV plans, which is where the magic happens, your traditional TV plans. But that's what they're asking for. They're not asking for a lot of our partners to bring their own data. They're asking for the advertisers themselves who want to activate the data they've already invested in.
So Rachel, how does the industry ensure accuracy then, since we all agree data is an important part of CTV advertising? So what's being done to ensure that the identity, the targeting, and the measurement is as accurate as possible?
Yeah, it's an area where I probably spend a good chunk of my time these days working on, because I think, to the point, Jay, that you were just making earlier, there's two sides to ensuring accuracy. There's one from the targeting standpoint, making sure that you're working with partners who care about performance and are taking those steps to make sure that there's not just more garbage data sort of entering the ecosystem to help with the audience targeting, but I think also on the measurement side, and ensuring that there are the tools that are being put in place to ensure that the in-target rates are being met and that the desired KPIs are actually being reached, sort of regardless of that platform. It's certainly an area where I spend a lot of time making sure that advertisers are seeing that. To your point about the fragmentation, that becomes more challenging the more fragmented we get, but I think that is, it's an important requirement and conversation that needs to be had as we think about pouring more and more dollars effectively into the channel.
Okay. So, Sean, we mentioned, you know, kind of the fragmentation. So how does a smaller content provider what do they need to do in order to participate in CTV ad monetization? How can they get noticed, discovered, their inventory sold in this fragmented system we have today?
Yeah, so we work with content providers that range from very small to the largest media companies in the world. So we see the full range of kind of how everybody attacks this market and what people do and that kind of stuff. Everyone has some kind of a problem, and largely it comes down to how fragmented and how new so much of this inventory is that a lot of the buy side doesn't really know how to deal with it. It doesn't know where to go. Where does it, what does this look like? Should it be linear buy? Should it be a digital buy? So really what we work with a lot of these producers on is first dressing, as I mentioned earlier, dressing up that inventory to really look and feel like something that the buy side is used to. And that all comes as part of, kind of the suite of things that we do in the technology stack. But then secondarily, a lot of these companies have, the biggest problem is they don't really have enough scale on their own. They may distribute to all kinds of places, and they may have, they may have some level of, kind of inventory available to them, but it's not enough to, kind of go out to the buy side and say, hey, I'm a, unique producer, buy from me. They've got to kind of aggregate that inventory and into other places, whether it's through programmatic or through things like that we've built, like the sort of ad marketplace that we've built to aggregate a lot of the CTV inventory that's on our network or things like that to participate in that, kind of CTV ecosystem in a larger way. It's hard, and it's the Wild West. Everybody's, still trying to figure it out, really, especially the publishers themselves, big and small. They're all, kind of still plugging away, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, from the perspective of a small-ish company, we're growing very rapidly, so we're not going to be small forever. But, we look ourselves in a space where we're a virtual MVPD in a world where there's Sling and, Hulu Live and YouTube TV. So, one of the things that we do is we try to make sure we're working with our partners, at all these people on the stage to make sure that we're, passing the same sorts of data so we look like the other content. So people know that this is, and it's linear content with dynamically inserted ads. It's sort of the way I look at it. It's still linear television. It's just the ads aren't linear. But so for us, it's making sure that that's there. Also making sure that as people request new things, that we can be on the leading edge of providing the content signals or other things for targeting, other things in reporting, all in a privacy-safe environment to make sure that we're sort of help to lead those things as they come through. And it's also an education process. We spend a lot of time, we've talked to the SSPs, we get in front of their sales teams, but then we also go and try to do teaching events with the DSPs and then go meet with the agencies, the advertisers, so they understand who we are from a perspective of a company that's been, not sponsoring the Super Bowl or anything, but doing performance-based marketing, spending our dollars wisely, and trying to make sure that people know who we are, understand our brand, and will want to join in the pool of the advertisers and like-minded advertising.
I would say that a platform for aggregating audience and inventory is even important for the bigger players, not just for the small ones. Because if we do better targeting through dynamic ad insertion, even on linear, we did some analysis that even some of the bigger networks in the United States, the one that started their own streaming channel last week, if they go and target in their inventory, they can still typically only reach 35 to 40% of the full audience because they're just not there. And so for them to reach their full audience, they'll have to aggregate with other inventory and put it in a platform to aggregate with that other inventory. So I think that is what's going to have to happen.
I think that's part of where programmatic comes in for a lot of these customers, because what we find is when an advertiser runs a campaign, they're running a targeted campaign, it may be DMA targets, and they have audience targets, and they have all of these different targets that are going in. But by participating in these larger kind of like pools of inventory, whether that be something like Wurl's ad pool, which is a really cool initiative of kind of bringing all of the content providers in to that, or whether it be programmatic, kind of participating in deal IDs or curated marketplaces. The idea is that there are thousands of incremental budgets that a sales team would never be able to go out and capture because they just can't sell these small, they're not big enough to essentially sell the plan by themselves, but they are, when they start to pool together resources, big enough to start to capture as a segment, being CTV and all the players in them, these TV budgets and start to absorb that. And that may mean you have 1% of your fill is coming from some small campaign that you didn't even know, but now it's coming in programmatically because somebody helped facilitate that and onboard that for you. And over time, those thousands of campaigns start to really add up to turn into something very meaningful. And because they're targeted, the effective CPMs and return on investment and the yield that you get out of that could be much better than you would get just kind of trying to go in and absorb the campaigns. I mean, we see this with what the NCTC is trying to do with Mobi TV and kind of changing the cable industry, which is the idea that if you start to aggregate all of these players together, you start to have a significant amount of connected television inventory in each DMA that everybody in that who's participating, now that they've kind of moved to standards, can start to take advantage of in a way that they never were able to do before. And it has the added benefit of once you start activating the data in and you can kind of offer that ability to really carve out small audiences and make it meaningful, you can also start bringing in all the incremental budgets that Facebook and Google and the other walled gardens are capturing right now. Your small and medium-sized businesses, your multi-rooftop car dealerships, your local flower shops and pizza shops that could have gone in and found, they never would have advertised on TV before. And now they're coming in at the same time the CPG brands are, and the major auto brands are, and the big retailers are. And now all of a sudden you've got this really healthy TV ecosystem that's entirely audience targeted, and it's not necessarily about selling an entire spot to one advertiser. It's about selling the available inventory, that's a deterministic amount of inventory, to anybody and everybody who needs to reach that audience in a way that's very seamless and fluid and frictionless. And that's what I think everybody working together and agreeing to kind of work on programmatic and others is doing in order to rapidly change this marketplace, which you've seen with the e-marketer spend numbers, which were significant. It's connected TV and OTT is bigger than the cable market ad spend right now, today.
So we've mentioned programmatic advertising and some of the advantages it can bring in connected television, but Alan, what are some of the disadvantages then to programmatic trading?
I think, we've had this discussion a little bit about what happened in display and others, which was kind of a race to the bottom, and everybody was very concerned about pricing. Two things really came out of that. I think there was kind of a rush to open marketplace, which, if you guys are familiar, open marketplace is just the idea that you're going to work with a programmatic partner and you're going to put your inventory out there, and whoever's going to buy it's going to buy it. There's some problems with that. One is that it can create in some instances, it can create a race to the bottom from a pricing standpoint. And when we work with all of our partners, our job is to protect their audiences, protect the integrity of their sales processes, and to essentially allow them to earn the money that they need to invest in content in their businesses and their technology and their infrastructure and their people, because it's not cheap to run any of these businesses. And the advertising and the audience is very valuable. So how do you maintain that value so that there's not a big disparity in pricing, so people are just kind of making anything and everything the same? And so I think the challenges that everybody kind of learned in the display world was, how do you protect your data? How do you protect your audiences? How do you do data safe environments? How do you activate data in a way that you aren't allowing buyers necessarily to undermine the value proposition that your sales team is taking to market? If I'm going to go out there and my sales team is going to have to defensively say that my CPM is $45, which is much, much higher, orders of magnitude higher than just traditional television. How do I do that without undermining my value proposition? How do I participate in this market without losing my individual uniqueness and value as an organization? And I think that was a lot of the challenge that we really focused on early in trying to create data-safe transactional environments where data doesn't leak, where you can activate advertiser data, but you're not necessarily leaking things like IP addresses and all the other identifiers that can then be used to kind of target and undermine your audiences. I think that's a challenge because it kind of forced everybody over into a private marketplace mindset and a very one-on-one relational mindset. But now that the agencies are bringing over big TV budgets, there's enough there to make all of that meaningful, and we're seeing a healthy ecosystem grow that is privacy safe and protects all of the brands and participants who are participating in programmatic. I think that was a challenge to get to and to make that transition and to get people thinking that programmatic is not a race to the bottom, but is a way to really bring incremental value to your business in a safe way.
I think another challenge is quality control, right? The dregs of programmatic, which created billions of dollars in fraud and now has an FBI division investigating it, has already started to rear its head into connected television, right? Those same bad actors are creating fake inventory to push into exchanges to make you think like you're buying connected TV, but you're not. You're buying a bot site somewhere in Cyprus. So that is another problem of programmatic, that there's not as many safeguards to create that quality control that you are going to have in traditional television. So that has to become a serious consideration for all parties in the ecosystem to protect that. It's not going to take it down, but it can potentially stunt its growth.
Yeah, I had a great example of that was, and I'm sorry, it's just, that we had somebody I was talking to, she was a friend of mine, she was running a digital division in a major company, and she told me that they were doing audience extension into connected television for $5 CPM. And I said, you are not.
Right, buyer beware has to be something,
yeah,
right?
I said, you are absolutely not. We work with most of the players with direct connections, and when you buy from our platform, you can call them and you can say, I ran this many ads, and they can look in their servers and they can go, yep, you sure did. There's no connected TV inventory out there that is $5 CPM. So there's an entire side of this buy side that's been conditioned to this cheap, unlimited inventory that is not paying attention to the quality, and that's going to feed the problem.
Yeah, there's a buyer beware issue, and then there's the bad actors who are going to take advantage of that, and then that will hurt the whole
That's right.
market.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Now, that's just one thing that, from the publisher side that we have is because our audience is a paying audience, they're an authenticated audience, we serve all the ads to them from the server side, so everything runs through us, goes through an authenticated person. We feel pretty good about our inventory and where it is and how it stands in safety. And so that's one of the things I think that we also bring to the table, and other MVPDs and other subscription services bring to the table is you're serving ads to an audience who is paying to see you. So there's no really ways for easy ways.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
always ways.
You are like a shining beacon of quality, and you have authenticated users.
That's
right?
actually how I describe myself.
That's right. That's as you should.
Shining beacon of quality. So
Ampersand is building a shining beacon of a marketplace example where everyone is quality. So I think if you can put together the players with a standardized ID structure, definition of data, this thing could massively grow and be replicated globally. But I think right now there's just still a lot of self-interest out there. Everyone is fighting for and jockeying for positioning and wants to win because we all know there's too many services, there's too many ad tech platforms, so a lot of people are going to die, and then at that point, who's left will be quality, and if that comes together, then this will all work well.
Right, but I think there's also still going to be that evolution where there's all this jockeying to be that premier platform who's going to be able to capture that. At the same time, there is going to be that same evolution that we've seen that combats this whole quality, like we have to work through the quality piece at the same time as getting to more and more CTV inventory will be available via open exchange. And just things of that nature are going to be part of that evolution. So I think it's sort of on everyone to make sure we're doing so in a way that we don't replicate the same digital mistakes of that.
The programmatic ecosystem exploded very quickly, and it wasn't because of a lot of high quality players joining it. So let's learn from that mistake and not ruin what has been a 70 years great brand advertising platform.
Yeah, and I think that's been I think that's part of the challenge. If you are a major broadcaster and you're going in, and what's changing the perception, I think, for a lot of the broadcasters and the players is that the trend like we see right now, which is that the advertisers are actually coming up and they're saying, I made an investment into buying, finding, and getting my audiences into Adobe or Trade Desk or all these other buy-side platforms, and now they're actually coming to these traditional broadcasters and saying, look, we want to spend this money with you, and we'll even do a programmatic guaranteed up front with you, but we're only going to do it if we can leverage all this technology that we're invested in, this data, these buy-side platforms, all of these pieces that are there. And so I think, there's a lot of people that were hesitant because of the history of programmatic to jump into that. I would say that kind of goes to my earlier point, which is we've had to think about how programmatic transacts in broadcast and television much differently than we've had to do in display. And I think a lot of the people who came from display and have tried to move into video have had a very difficult time in learning those lessons of it's just very different. It's much more about direct relationships, direct sales, and really kind of optimized supply paths than it is with any of your partners working with 35 plus SSPs or, you know, supply side platforms, because essentially that's going to undermine your entire value proposition.
And for the publisher, that's kind of, you mean, leading into the perception problem for the publisher. The publisher is like going into whatever their idea of programmatic is and saying, okay, I plug in once and I get money. It doesn't work that way. There's all kinds of things that you have to do, that you have to work on, as you I'm sure know very well, that, you know, to really work that from an education standpoint and a technology standpoint and a decorating your inventory and all this kind of stuff, it isn't just, you know, plug and play. There's a lot of, you know, kind of work that has to go into that aspect of it to really make it work and hum well.
Yeah, I mean, programmatic in video and is mirrors traditional sales in video. I mean, there's a lot of benefits in augmentation, other things that you do. But there's a lot of moving and manual pieces and a lot of people in the field shaking hands and signing IOs and doing these things. Even if people are plugging into the ecosystem, it's just there. And I'm sorry, I take a lot of time on that, but it is just massively different. And I think people you know, have a hard time wrapping their head around just how different it is. On our platform, 90-something% of all the transactions are private when it comes to connected TV devices.
So Reed is our lone publisher on the panel here. How is the experience with selling the CTV inventory been in private marketplaces versus the open exchanges?
Yeah, so one of the things, we didn't come into the space with a legacy product or a legacy direct sales force that we had to worry about having, you know, programmatic or resellers compete with. So that was one of the things that we sort of started with as an advantage, at least the way I saw it. And so when we've been working out with, you know, SpotX and others out there, the way I look at it is I've got a sales force of, you know, 1 to 10,000 people on the ground that are actually out there promoting me. And as long as those people understand what I'm offering and, you know, the brand attributes I have, what great inventory I have, then they're the people out there talking to the agencies and the advertisers, and we're talking to the DSPs as well. And so we're leaning heavily into PMPs. We think that's the place where we should be. So we have a small percentage in the open marketplace. It's really what ends up not being, you know, sold to the PMPs. We're trying to drive those with multiple PMPs through multiple SSPs. We're trying to use all the initials we have, as long as there's always a P in there. So we also work with DNPs. So just, you know, but it's important for us to do that. And then we're also seeing that, you know, the mirror to direct sales for us in programmatic is going to be programmatic guaranteed, which will be a PMP that'll have, you know, more targeting, more data, and more, you know, sort of, you know, more negotiation around it. We see that as sort of where we lean into it. But, you know, our partners are you know, our best advocates, and they're our best salespeople. And so that's one of the ways we're able to lean into programmatic.
Okay. So one of the questions actually that came up during our discussion was privacy, because there's certainly a lot of in the news with things like GDPR in Europe, California setting its own regulations, whether we have some sort of national regulation eventually in the United States. So is privacy as much of an issue in connected television advertising as it's turning into in digital advertising?
Yes,
Yeah.
No doubt.
even more so. Yeah. Because right now the signals that CTV relies on are not going to necessarily be stable for the future, right? An IP address is not going to be a stable identifier. And every platform has its own ID, so those aren't interoperable. And then the publishers themselves will have an ID structure, right? If you're an authenticated user of Philo, you have an account with Hulu, right? These are all different IDs. And so if those aren't something that can have a common translation, right, then it's going to be a problem for being able to be even compliant, right? So a lot of these privacy regulations are around giving ownership of data to a user and giving that user notice for what their data is, what data is being collected and how it's being used and who is it being given to. And also potentially for users to be able to say, I would like to monetize my data, I'll participate. So for all of that use case, that's both for the benefit of the user as well as to be regulating or to be compliant with regulation is going to take, I think, a lot of engineering and ingenuity and partnerships that aren't currently in place.
It's only going to work if it works the same way across all of
It has
us.
to be unified, yeah.
And so we have all these laws coming at us. The lawyers don't even agree what's exactly meant by all
Are
these
you a
laws.
service provider? Are you a company? I mean,
Then
these are,
there's going to be other states that are going to have different variations of them that nobody knows about yet. And so we should stay consistent but very clear of the board. I think we're better off being a little bit more conservative in the data and how we use it and stay clear of the border than to try to push it.
and there needs to be a national policy for the US. 50 policies is untenable and will kill us. So I think that needs to happen, and there's definitely, not, all the lobbying happening in Washington right now is not uniform, but it also is somewhat seeking the same goal, right? And trade groups like the IAB do have a consistent, unified approach to what they're trying to hopefully convince lawmakers to create, so that CCPA version 2.0, which is being written by a guy from the real estate industry, right, doesn't become national law that affects a $130 billion industry.
I mean, we work with the, kind of the places that we distribute all these channels to are oftentimes device manufacturers. They have all kinds of problems about how do we collect consent? We don't do it now. How quickly can we update these televisions and connected devices and all this kind of stuff to augment it? What can we do on the device? What can we not? It's like, it's endlessly complex for so many of these people, and that's only the device side. The publishers are also struggling with, how does that get implemented across all of their distribution for all this inventory that they have, which oftentimes, despite encouragement, they may not have real technology control over.
If someone opts out, which is part of
What
the
happens?
rule, then how does that opt-out go into the daisy chain of programmatic?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we took a very conservative approach on data from the beginning. We also have, BPPA stuff, so more P's. But but even as we start looking at CCPA, we start looking at, okay, what are we doing with every partner we have? What are we doing with everything? So it's we've been spending the last few months just starting working through, I think we're in a good place, but there's a lot of places that you have to look.
And you probably have more control than the average device manufacturer over the apps that you
we
build.
set those controls in at the beginning, so we feel, but we don't have a device listening to your household.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and you have subscriber login data, but when you think about it, so then if this gets back and this, when you get into the unified TV plan, how the heck are you going to do a unified TV plan if you can't match kind of all, as a user, I consume content on my phone, on my tablet, on my, multiple Roku devices, on a Samsung device, on like all of these different things, and Xbox. And then how do you come back with a unified, holistic look at what a reach and frequency was in the way that TV planners and TV buyers did? That's all. So until some of this is sorted, some of the measurement challenges can't be sorted. And I'll be honest, I don't see the industry adopting a one unified ID. I think there's too many competing interests out there to make that happen. So then there's some sort of kind of half step you've got to get into to get there and still hit compliance across every area you serve against.
Right, and to build on that, I feel like there needs to be some sort of education, because as a consumer, I actually really like when the ads I see are relevant for me. Yeah. And it creates a better experience, which at the end of the day is what we're all trying to achieve.
Less and more relevant ads are to everyone's benefit.
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel like there hopefully will be some sort of balancing, because if you go too far in the extreme, we're going to go back to just totally irrelevant ads with high frequency coming at consumers, which would probably create this very much negative reinforcing feedback loop.
We haven't thrown around a lot of new buzzwords, but the idea of how do you unify people that have really protective nature around their data, right? Gerrit, you deal with this all the time, right? There's a lot of initiatives that can create this kind of capability, right? Comcast is spinning off the block graph initiative. Blockchain in general is a general purpose technology that can be used for this exact purpose of people that have sensitive data can match it in a way where sensitive data is not actually leaked or transmitted to anybody, so therefore you can operate with the onus of a unified ID type structure without actually shipping data all over the place. And giving users then that control, because they would have their own hash ID, and if they want to monetize it, you could actually record how much data is being used and monetize them for it. So these types of initiatives are already starting at the edges, so to speak. It's not mainstream, it's not on these panels at this conference yet, but those things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, the key ultimately in the challenge is scale, right? I mean, so in order to create liquidity and scale, we've got to be able to do this there, and that's where context comes in. But to your point, even context can be challenging because VIPA, if you guys don't know what VIPA is, that's the essentially this law that was created around Blockbuster and a Supreme Court justice named Robert Bork. But essentially they got hold of his Blockbuster records and they said, they put that in the press and they passed a law that said, well, you can't know what people are watching. That's illegal. So now how does that factor into all these digital transactions when you have to signal to a buyer across a multiple electronic chain that this person is watching football?
Like that law needs to kind of be updated or go away. It's like from 1982.
There's a ton of
Doesn't
laws
apply.
that are
Yeah.
out there that are still kind of like in there in that mix, and until it gets kind of all, it's challenging. And I think that all of these things that have kind of brought up become a barrier to scale at some point.
Okay, and the last question I wanted to ask our panelists to all be market research analysts, more or less, for the last question in terms of, if we were to gather back here next year, what do you think will have actually changed? Or could we, have a panel where you'd all be giving the exact same answers? Or will something change in the next year? And all the things we've discussed.
Ad-supported streaming will grow faster than people expect, because I think the subscription fatigue factor and complexity factor is going to be a bigger deal, right? I mean, there's just so many things hitting the market at once that a lot of people, like I look at my parents and they just wait for us to be around to like kind of put stuff on. Otherwise, they watch Dish, right? Because they know how that works. So I think there's going to be probably a advertiser push towards high quality ad-supported streaming, just because that's where they know they can get to younger audiences in a way where, because people don't know, like, oh, Disney Plus is this huge deal, but there's no ads there. So it's not a thing for advertisers yet, but Hulu is, right? So it's complicated in how some of these combo services are coming out.
Yeah, like HBO Max is launching without ads, but we'll have ads in 2 years. So then what does that do to that whole ecosystem?
Yep.
And the same thing with all these subscription VOD services. Us as a virtual MVPD, we look at ourselves as we're a low-cost service. It's $20. No one's going to be able to afford a $120 cable bill plus Disney Plus HBO Max plus Peacock to be able to get that other content. So in our world, we look at it as we think that's going to really help us grow, because if you get $20 for us and then $6 for Disney and then $12 for Netflix, you're still looking really good. You've got all the content you need if you don't need sports. So those are the kind of things that we look at from a growing perspective. I'm very curious about all of these non-ad supported services that are launching, and what Peacock is actually going to turn out to be, HBO Max with ads, when they'll look. It's going to be an interesting world.
Maybe in 3 years we'll be up here saying there's going to be this really cool thing that like bundles all these things together, and you pay one subscription and get access to it all.
It's only $150 a month. It's all good. Yeah.
And it includes your Wi-Fi. How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
To come back to your question, I'm a big believer in the power of television and the scale or the reach of television. I'm also an optimist, so I think we'll see some of the fragmentation just go away for consumers as well as for buyers. And I hope that we can come up with a universal identity layer that meets all the requirements, all the legal requirements, so that we can, and because then I think we have a medium that is very, very competitive.
Yep.
And it's not legacy TV or CTV or OTT, it's going to be TV.
Yep.
And it's going to be very competitive against search and social.
Yeah, to that point, I think that the conversation will change and that there won't be panels asking about the value of CTV. It will just be an obvious component of every media plan.
Yeah, I mean, was there a mobile panel on this one? Like, everybody's got it now, right? So the year mobile's passed, it's there, right? So I think to that point, for sure.
We sit in the free ad-supported space largely, the Roku channel, the Samsung TV Pluses of the world, that kind of stuff. I'm sure it'll be a bigger topic next year because the number of people that are launching a free ad-supported service or have in recent, like the last 3 months even, is growing. Device manufacturers getting into the business, them getting into the ad business also. What does that mean? How are they going to do it? Do they really have the right people to do so? And I think free ad supported continues to grow and continues to kind of be a massive medium, and will continue to grow and be a bigger medium, and to kind of take the place of, I don't know, some version of pay TV, where you can get, if the same content that's on cable is on some of these free ad supported services, do you have to pay for it beyond some of the things that you can't get, first run episodes of whatever it may be, or sports or things like that? So free ad support for us is, we think it's going to grow quite a bit.
I think you're right, and I think in terms of the growth around this, there's probably two factors. One, I think for advertisers, the big advertisers, the entrance of people like Disney Plus and HBO Max and all of these, and all the press around and everything else, has kind of legitimized this, moved it from a cord cutters thing to a products and services that everybody's using. And I remember when we used to have to explain to buyers what Philo was, and what Wurl was, and what Samba was, and all of these things, right? And now we don't. Like they're starting. A lot of them started to get it. There's still some that are towing in to get it. But the more of these services that launch, the more that this becomes the normal. And at the same time, you have this factor where the actual kind of legacy environments are also shifting over to adopt these same standards. So we're seeing in traditional cable environments and adapting VAST. We're seeing, again, the idea that new video providers, the NCTC and others that are rolling out, are all going to be VAST-based, and a lot of them are going to be cloud-based. All of this is going to start to normalize. You've got ATSC3, and you've got the Project OR, and you've got all of these pieces that are going in that are going to allow these individualized, personalized kind of household advertisements across all of these different methodologies. But it's all going to kind of, to an advertiser, it's all going to roll back. It's all going to be VAST-based. It's all going to run through their buy-side platform. And to them, it's just going to be the new normal. And I think there's been a lot in this that's starting to kind of make this, not kind of a fringe thing anymore, but something that becomes mainstream. And what that's going to do is get the agencies to stop shifting percentages of their digital budgets into connected television and this whole new ecosystem, and they're going to start really moving their TV budgets over to follow the large chunks of audience that have shifted over, that they haven't, their audiences have shifted to these platforms much faster than they've shifted their traditional TV budgets.
Okay. We have a few minutes remaining. If there are any questions from the audience, if you all would have anything you'd like to ask, I can just repeat it and panelists can answer. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Everybody talks about programmatic and the way to target people better. What about inventory management? What about the people that are not targeted? Maybe it's a question to Gerrit. How do you apply inventory management know-how from traditional television into programmatic?
So the question is, how do you apply inventory management from traditional television into the
This is a big
connected
problem.
TV?
I think this is what Alan also talked about earlier, because everybody thinks that targeting is great, and it is great if you want to buy an audience for a high CPM, but what do you do with all the audience that you can't sell? And so yield management is without yield management, you can't be programmatic, without proper yield management, because you'll just lose money. Because you'll think you'll make some money because you sell this one piece of the audience, and you'll lose money. Okay, that's a 20-second answer.
Yes.
A question, I wanted to get some perspective on planning per se. So planning for programmatic is very different from planning for TV. And we know like programmatic signals when you get from the pipes today, like it's very different from what you get from the linear TV side. So it's kind of a collision on how agencies look at it. I wanted to get some perspective on what you guys see happening in 2020 or like onwards, where it's planning at.
So what we've seen is kind of this trend through some of our partners and some of the integrations that we've done, is what they do is they'll use kind of an indexed planning system against the TV side. So they'll say, based on the TV inventory we have, this is the plan. And so if you're a broadcaster, for example, and you've got a show schedule and you need to hit a specific demo or an advanced target, you can use a company like Clip, who used to be part of our ecosystem, who goes in there and then they can forecast an audience, and then they can forecast demographics, and they can say, this is what you need to spend against in show. So you need to run this ad at 7 p.m. on Sunday in this show, and you're going to hit this size of the demographic estimated, right? At the same time, you use the actual data segments on the OTT side, and it's not necessarily a show bound, it's more of how much of an audience can we get against that. And then you've got to create a plan that combines both of those into something that's executable and flexible. Because if that show didn't get the tune in on Saturday or Sunday at 7 p.m. that you thought it was going to get, it got more or less, you then can use your OTT budgets to kind of like flow back against that. And now doing that across multiple partners and then doing that against, if you're an agency or a brand, to do that against cable, against programmer and broadcaster inventory or MVPD, virtual MVPD inventory, against pure digital kind of inventory is very, very difficult. And I think there's a lot of people out there that right now that are trying to solve that problem. But ultimately, you've got to kind of take a combination of indexes and GRPs and then extrapolate that out with advanced data targets on the digital side. And it's there's a couple platforms that are coming up that are working on that.
Yeah, and from a publisher perspective, we'll work with SpotX and say, they'll talk about these deals they have and what audience do you have that you can fill them, and we'll make some estimates, and we think that we can fill out this amount of the deal, and we just that allows us to sort of get a sense of where our demand is going to come from and move through. Nothing is guaranteed on any side, but we're trying to make sure that we're sort of scaling and moving things around the right buckets and working together. It's even though it's machine to machine, it's a lot of people sort of, working those machines.
That's right, and you end up with, in TV, you always had make goods, right? So the idea is that you can use OTT and your other digital avenues to kind of reduce your make goods, because the faster you can close that cycle, the faster you can reflow and reallocate inventory against the advanced targets you're trying to hit, right, based on tuning data. But it's tough. No, you're exactly right. So if you're trying to, let's just use a regular age and demo break, right? I'm trying to hit females 18 to 35. I would never hit females 18 to 35. But that's terrible.
So you hit
Sorry.
older females?
I just realized after that came out, it's terrible. So I'm trying to reach, a certain demographic. You can find those same targets on the OTT side, and you can use some of the data, like the Comscore data, for example, right? And you can find those target data, and then you can go in, you can make a plan. You can say, we can estimate a reach frequency on the OTT there. It's not necessarily tied to a show at that point, right? It's tied to an audience that you're trying to reach. Where on the linear side, you're going to say, well, this show indexes very highly, and so I'm going to buy this, this linear ad, and then I'm going to get an estimated, number out of the, million people that watched it. 65% were in that particular age group.
I guess the question is, will there always be a common currency?
I think you have to move away from that.
I would.
There's no choice.
From Comscore, I would clearly argue that there's more than one currency that would benefit the market.
I think you still need calibration panels. Like, the idea of a panel isn't a bad, it's not a dirty word. I think having just proxies for large parts of the demographic population as the currency, that's probably what needs to go away.
Yeah, I think with the granularity and how we will in the future view audience buying, I think that it's going to have to open up for more than one set of currencies to come through and have the different metrics by which we all can agree to transact.
So you need two things. You need to be able to get cross-platform audience reach, right? That'll help control things like frequency, as well as help you understand at a raw number how much are you reaching of a desired audience, and then outcomes can help you then calibrate against it. And then the use of more modern panels will tell you, well, who is in the room, right? If CTV is on, is it one person, 2 people, 3 people? How many people are in the room watching it? You're not going to get that for the census of the whole population, but you can get it for a small subset, and then use that to model and calibrate, and then you can actually be pretty precise.
And then does the panel move from people to ACR in technology too? I mean,
Yeah, I think ACR is an input into.
I think we need another panel for this.
I was going to say we could have another panel on ACR. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention and participation. We appreciate it. Thank you very much to our panelists.